The Cold War was never really cold. Why did America and the Soviet Union spend nearly 50 years preparing for World War III without ever declaring war on each other? Because the peace was an illusion. Millions of people died. Entire countries were destroyed. Governments were overthrown. And behind closed doors, the world came closer to nuclear annihilation than most people realize. The Cold War is often remembered as a long, tense standoff, a frozen chess match between two empires. But from Washington and Moscow's perspective, it wasn't tension. It was survival. By 1945, both nations had emerged from the ashes of World War II more powerful than any countries in human history. They were the last two titans standing. The problem? Only one of them could dominate the post-war world. And neither side could afford to let the other win, because losing meant total destruction. It started with a forced marriage. During World War II, America and the USSR fought together as allies to defeat Nazi Germany. But their mutual distrust never disappeared. It was just put on hold. They had entirely different visions for the future of humanity. America championed global capitalism and democracy. The Soviets demanded the global triumph of communism. The moment Hitler was gone, the alliance immediately began falling apart. A dangerous cycle of paranoia took root. America feared Soviet communist expansion across a bruised and broken Europe. The Soviets, having just lost 27 million citizens to a brutal invasion, feared another attack from the capitalist West. Both fears were entirely real. Both sides genuinely believed they were acting defensively. But to the other side, every defensive move looked like an act of raw aggression. This is the exact moment the Cold War was born. Suddenly, every action triggered an equal and opposite reaction, trapped in a domino effect that neither superpower could stop. The Soviets seized control of Eastern Europe, turning it into a massive buffer zone of satellite states. Washington panicked. In response, America announced the Truman Doctrine to contain communism anywhere on Earth, pumping billions of dollars into Europe through the Marshall Plan to rebuild capitalist economies. Moscow saw this as economic warfare. The Soviets struck back, launching the Berlin blockade to cut off Western access to the city. The West responded by flying supplies over the blockade for nearly a year, and then forming NATO, a massive military alliance aimed squarely at the Soviet Union. One side made a move. The other side panicked, then responded even harder. The cycle was spiraling out of control. By 1949, the stakes changed forever. The Soviet Union detonated their first atomic bomb. Now, the superpowers faced two terrible options. Option 1, direct war. If they marched troops into each other's territory, it would instantly trigger a nuclear apocalypse. Total global destruction. Option 2, do nothing. But doing nothing meant allowing your mortal enemy to slowly dominate the planet, piece by piece, until you were surrounded and defeated. Neither option was acceptable. It created a bizarre, agonizing contradiction. They must fight. But they cannot fight. Inside the halls of power, leaders argued fiercely over how to break this deadlock. Inside America, strategists clashed. Some argued for containment, simply drawing a line in the sand and stopping communism from spreading. Others demanded rollback, using covert operations to aggressively push communism back. Eventually, they settled on massive retaliation, threatening to unleash the entire US nuclear arsenal if the Soviets crossed the line. Inside the USSR, the debate was just as intense. Hardliners demanded rapid expansion and the creation of more buffer states, while others pushed to fund global revolutionary movements, destabilizing Western empires from within. They were rewriting the rules of war in real time, desperate to find a way to win without pulling the ultimate trigger. In October 1962, the math failed. The illusion of safety shattered during the Cuban Missile Crisis. American spy planes discovered Soviet nuclear missiles hidden in Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. In a flash, the threat was no longer across the ocean. It was on America's doorstep. The White House ordered a naval blockade around the island. Nuclear forces were activated on both sides. Strategic bombers took to the skies, loaded with live atomic weapons. Military commanders on both sides pushed their leaders to strike first before it was too late. For 13 days, humanity balanced on a knife edge. A single misunderstanding, a single nervous radar operator, and everything would burn. At the final second, President Kennedy and Premier Khrushchev looked into the abyss and backed down. A secret deal was struck, and the missiles were removed. But something changed forever. Both sides finally understood a terrifying truth. Nuclear war was completely unwinnable. The superpowers needed a safer way to bleed each other dry. And they found it. Instead of fighting each other, they fought through everyone else. The era of the proxy war had begun. If the Soviet Union backed a communist movement, America sent money, weapons, and troops to fight them. If America backed a government, the Soviets armed the rebels to tear it down. In Korea and Vietnam, millions died in jungles and rice paddies. In Afghanistan, the Soviets waged a brutal decade-long war against US-backed fighters. Across Africa and Latin America, civil wars raged, fueled by an endless supply of American and Soviet weapons. From the perspective of Washington and Moscow, this strategy was a brilliant success. It kept the peace. It prevented World War III. But from the perspective of everyone caught in the middle, it was an absolute catastrophe. This is the true payoff of the era. The Cold War was never cold. It was simply happening somewhere else. By the 1980s, the world believed the Soviet Empire was an unstoppable, permanent superpower. But beneath the surface, a hidden flaw was eating away at its foundation. The USSR was running out of time. The Soviet economy was stagnating. Their system couldn't keep up with Western technological innovation. To maintain the illusion of equality, Moscow was spending an unsustainable percentage of its wealth on the military arms race. Worse, the war in Afghanistan had become a bleeding wound, draining vital resources and lives with no victory in sight. Citizens inside the bloc were losing faith in the system entirely. The empire looked massive, heavily armored, and terrifying from the outside. But internally, the pillars were already cracking. Then, the end came at blinding speed. The Berlin Wall fell. The Iron Curtain crumbled. And on December 25, 1991, the Soviet Union simply disappeared from the map. There was no final, cataclysmic battle. There was no grand surrender ceremony on a battleship. No world war. Just one superpower quietly collapsing under the immense, exhausting weight of a conflict it could never truly win. And that is the greatest irony of all. The Cold War was designed to prevent World War III. But to achieve that, it turned the entire planet into a shadow battlefield. America and the Soviet Union never fired a shot directly at one another. But for the millions of families across Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Africa, and Latin America, the Cold War was anything but cold.